Welcome in, everybody. Hey, I'm Jessica Jones, the Cryptid Huntress. Welcome to a glitch in the Matrix. Man, do I have a really cool show for you guys today? I have my buddy Dennis Carroll here in the studio. We're going to be talking about the Jinn today. And we have a lot of really cool information and some great stories. And of course, Dennis always is a wealth of knowledge. And yeah, so this is going to be a really good time. You guys go get your popcorn and help me celebrate today. I just hit 7,000 subscribers, I assume. I'm seeing that in the chat. So yay, that's amazing. I want to thank everybody who subscribed to my channel and all the new subscribers and all the people who have been my A1 day ones who've been here from the get-go. I love each and every one of you guys. And yeah, that's a big number right there. So I'm super excited about that. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. All right, y'all. Well, if you guys would like to follow along with all of my shows, I have a website. That is thecryptidhuntress.com, where you can go find all of my shows and any event that I'm going to be at, whatever's going on in my life, you know, with the Cryptid Huntress stuff. It's going to be right there. Hey, Jeremiah, I see you in there. What's up, buddy? Okay. And also, I have a Patreon if you'd like to support my work. That's the Cryptid Huntress over on Patreon. And also, I have a shop that's called War Woman Goods over on Etsy. So thank you guys for all your support. Oh my gosh, it just really does mean the world to me. Okay. All right. Oh, and also, I think it's Gus's birthday today. I want to give a shout out to my dog, Gus, over there. The girl and her gong. I think it's your dog's birthday today. So I might have stuck a little something in the mail for him. So happy birthday to Gus. He's one of my moderators, y'all. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, let's get to our show today. Okay. Because we don't want to waste any time. In Western society, when we hear of the Jinn, the thought of a genie in a bottle often comes to mind. In the Middle East, the origin of these shape-shifting nymphs and satyrs, I don't even know how to pronounce that. Okay. It seems to be in the deserts of Arabia and are historically feared by those who encountered them. Jinn are said to be similar to spirits. They're capable of possessing people, shape-shifting into different forms, both human and animal, and significantly are known for their ability to turn invisible. There are several various types of jinns, one being such as the ghoul. So you guys might have heard of the ghouls. I think that's where we get our term, the ghoul, from. A vile-looking humanoid known as a goblin, demon, and devil. It's a shapeshifter that can take on the form of men, cats, horses. It says asses. So I guess donkeys. Camels, bulls, owls, and that of a multicolored dog. They can take on a human appearance in order to lure its victims away from their path and into its trap. Female ghulas are said to lure travelers away, seduce them, and even have relations, if you know what I mean, with these men. So there are a lot of stories of U.S. soldiers going into the Middle East on tour and encountering the Jinn, other supernatural experiences over there. And we're going to explore those today, along with a healthy dose of what the Jinn are. And for that, I have my friend Dennis Carroll here in the studio. Dr. Dennis Carroll has over 40 years of experience in the field of the paranormal. He studied, researched, and investigated many aspects pertaining to the paranormal and the supernatural, with many personal paranormal experiences. He's a researcher and investigator of the occult and the supernatural, a well-known authority on folklore, legends, superstitions, cryptozoology, and the occult. And you guys can find him on his YouTube channel. That's Hunting the Shadows. Please help me welcome to the Glitch in the Matrix today, Mr. Dennis Carroll. Hey,
Good
Dennis.
afternoon. All right. Good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I know you've done a lot of research on the Jinn, and
Uh-huh.
I'm pretty sure you might have a Genie bottle in that office somewhere. Do you?
Yeah, got one handy just in case we run into some problems. We could put our Gin in it maybe. Um, the interesting thing about the Gin is, and I'm been deep in demonology for a long, long time. They really go hand in hand because this is a type of demon that you're talking about in that respect. But according to legend, the Jinn are made out of or created out of smokeless fire. And that is, I think, an adequate description of spiritual energy because that's basically what you're dealing with is the spirits. These are spiritual beings in that respect.
Wow. Well, when I think of a Jinn, well, you and I both had Jinn jokes before we even started the show today. You
Uh-huh.
said you're gonna drink some gin. I said, well, this reminded me of my sister Jennifer. Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, we had the funny jokes beforehand, so that's great. But when I
Uh-huh.
think of a gin, I do think of a genie, and I think of the movie Aladdin. I think of the
Uh-huh.
movie Shazam and Kazam, even though one of them is a
Yeah.
Mandela effect. And also, I dream of Genie. There it's in pop culture, and
Uh-huh.
the genies seem to be more nice than mean and more demonic. So
Uh-huh.
I had not heard of them
That
or thought of them as being
that
demonic
goes.
until recent.
That goes deep, Jessica, deep into Arabian folklore and the Middle Eastern folklore. Definitely, the jinn are considered guardians in certain aspects of how you would put. They are also trapped, like in the Dybbuk boxes. They are put in containers. It can be a bottle, it can be a box, it can be a vase, or like this, a lamp. Uh, it can be any type of a thing that you can put them in. They are also put over treasures to guard treasures and supposedly households. If you are in good with the jinn, then you can have one in your house that sort of takes care of stuff and guards your house and watches over your family. But they don't like, in the Middle East, they don't really like to talk too much about the household jinn because they're kind of personal. You want to be quiet about them and not say much about them because you want to stay on their good side. They're in your house, kind of a thing, in your life. But then you have the other jinn that you encounter in certain other places. And according to Arabian folklore, the jinn haunts desolate desert places, caves, places like that, roads, crossroads, the old proverbial crossroads type thing. Um, they are actual spiritual beings. But here's the interesting thing, Jessica, about the jinn and what makes them so fascinating to me. They can appear as anything. They usually take the shape of snakes, but they can do any animal. They can be a dog, they can be a donkey, anything like that, or they can also appear as people. And here's the interesting thing: when the jinn actually takes on human shape, there will be a part of that that is still animal. It could be like there might be maybe they look human and have sort of a snake skin about them, or something like that. That's the way the jinn operate. So they are premier shapeshifters. Spiritual beings like this are that's their superpower, you might say. They can shapeshift very well, and that's what keeps you off guard. You don't know what you're really dealing with. Is that really a snake or donkey, or is that a jinn?
Hmm.
That's an interesting thing.
Well, do you know what that reminds me of? A skinwalker.
Uh-huh.
Skinwalkers are something that, and probably shouldn't be saying that name too much, because you're not supposed to say it. Otherwise, you'll get their attention, and
Well,
they can
as I
turn
said
into.
earlier, there's that big connection for the jinn with the fairies, and also with the Native American tricksters. The coyote was one, and the raven mocker. and all these other things. You got some correlation going on here. You know, that's the interesting thing about folklore all over the world, and I've studied it for many years. Is how these things have so similar qualities to them, and the Jinn is definitely in that category.
Wow. Yeah. So, okay, I have several types that we can go over just to start the show off today. There are
Yeah.
several types. I figured I'd kind of go over them because you did mention the ghoul. Okay, and the ghoul is the most common type. But
Yeah.
a lot of times, like you said, it can have tusk, it can have fangs. It's a man eater, like you said. It's in the deserts and wastelands, and it lays in wait, and it waits to ambush people in the shadows, and it hangs out in the rocks and caves, like you said as well.
Mhm.
But it gives them a false sense of security, kind of almost like, I talked about mermaids the other day, and those are sirens that will
Mhm.
lure you out and then attack you when you least expect it. And these things are actually capable of even having relations, if you know what I mean, with the opposite sex. Like
Oh
they
yeah.
pretend to be women, and it's almost to me it sounds like a succubus type spirit, but in human form.
Well, it's
So,
very much like the incubus and the succubus. You know,
mhm,
that's why that's the thing that really got me on the gym when I first went into studying demonology. The similarities there and the different aspects of it. The Jinn can appear as a man or a woman and seduce the opposite sex, whatever the case may be, and lure them into places where they will actually kill them and eat them. That's the ghoul. That's the bad guys in the Jinn world. The ghoul. That's where we get our word ghoul from, actually. That's where that comes from. And it actually means to them, it means a man eating type of a demon, a monstrous thing. The other kind of Jinn is more ambiguous. It can be good or bad, depending on how you relate to it. If you do good with it, it will usually reciprocate that. But if you're bad or do something bad to it, you're in bad trouble then, because they will take it out on you. And here's the interesting thing, Jessica. I've read reports of Jinn actually haunting houses and people's lives and destroying families, almost very much like demons do in European cultures. They will come in. They're almost like poltergeist. They will come in, move things, throw things around, scratch people, turn things over. They can really make your life very badly, very quickly, if you get on the wrong side of these guys.
well, so the Jinn are not just located in the Middle East, then the Jinn are worldwide, universe wide, it sounds like,
Mhm.
in parallel universes, probably, okay, all over the place. But
Mhm.
stories of the Jinn seem to be really focused in the Middle East, like in Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq. But they can pretty much be anywhere. Now, do you think the Jinn are like the stories that we hear about the ghouls and everything? It's the same spirit. It's just it's a different name that we give it here, but it's the
Well,
same
I
thing
think it's very
over there.
prevalent in the Middle East for the very reason that Islam has embraced it. Islam talks a lot about it in the Quran. You hear about the jinn and what they do and all that. And there are here's the strange part. There are two kinds of jinn. There is the believing jinn that believes in Allah, and the jinn that doesn't. It's an unbeliever. It's an atheist type jinn. They're the ones that are basically called ghouls. They're just evil. They're downright mean and despicable things. But then you have jinn that believe. They're sort of religious jinn. That's an interesting aspect. So it almost is very a mirror of actually the people who worship in that religion. It's sort of a mirror image for them in that respect. But you are talking about spiritual things, and by the way to keep the jinn away from you, especially the bad jinn, is to have some kind of amulet or something on you with the name of God on it. If it's got like Allah on it or whatever, that supposedly will keep the jinn away from you. And that is a big thing that they wear in the Middle East in a lot of places. Those amulets, they feel like they're not dressed unless they go out with that amulet. It protects them from these things. Here's one more thing about the jinn that I find interesting. They are not angels or fallen angels as we look upon them. Were created by Allah in a different category altogether than angels. Okay, angels are more powerful than jinn, but you're talking about two different types of spiritual entities here. And then you have a third type, which is a human spirit, human ghost kind of thing. They can be malevolent too, very much like the jinn. They can be benevolent or malevolent, depending on how you deal with them. But what I find interesting is that description of them, made from smokeless fire. That sounds very much to me like spiritual energy. And these beings are basically spirit until they take form. And that can sit like they could be like a snake, a cobra, a donkey, a dog, or person, or child. Whatever the situation calls for, they can do that. And that's what throws you off guard with a jinn. You never know what you're dealing with.
You don't.
You know?
That can be pretty terrifying. Now, I would assume that the women jinn, the ones that look like women, I think they call them the Sila or the Salah. They have to be pretty beautiful, I would think. You know, I if they can take on any form of a woman, a human, if I was one, I'd want to be a pretty one, especially go out and seduce those men they're going to go eat. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but that's just me. I would think so. So, yeah, and with the women ones, the ones that are female, okay, like this big lady here, they torture their prey too. I mean, I guess they all kind of torture them and stuff, but they're very sadistic. Very sadistic, sadistic, which is scary. Adds another
that's sort of like the cat with a mouse. Before it kills the mouse, it plays with it, and that's the way they are. That's their sadistic evil side. You know, it's bad enough just to kill you, but then to torture you while you're doing it, you know, it's bad enough too, on top of that. But the interesting thing about this is I think it is sort of like we say about the fairies. They have a glamour. They have a magic. They have a magic that can make themselves appear desirable. And what I think is that they're basically doing, and I've noted this with other spiritual entities, being able to take that image from you, that image that you either desire or fear, and use that image against you. That's insidious in that respect.
It is. So they can actually take your thoughts, figure out what you're most scared of. I mean, that sounds pretty terrifying. It sounds like it's a story that you tell your kids at night to scare them before they go to bed. You know, but that's what my parents did for me.
And that's like, you know, speaking of the Eastern, look at the Rakshasa, which is a very big demon in India. It can take on the form, it's very much like the jinn. It can take on the form of someone you trust, like your mother or your child or whatever, and gain your trust so that it will eat you. That's bad. Think about it. You can't really trust your own eyes, especially when you're dealing with spiritual things like the jinn.
Okay, well, that reminds me of a story of Little Red Riding Hood and how she went to go visit her grandmother, but it was a big bad wolf dressed in grandma's clothes. And, and
what big teeth you have, grandmother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we often thought about Little Red Riding Hood there, Jessica. I mean, I'd have to have a talk with that girl because she should have known better that that was not her grandmother. But anyway, you have to wonder about this shape-shifting thing. That's what throws people off. And, you know, I think that was an ancient fear of mankind. You know, you don't know what you're dealing with. It might look like a donkey, but is it a donkey? Look at the aspects of the fairy and the fae that we've talked about before, and they can take on the form of horses and stuff like that. You just don't know what you're dealing with until it's too late. Usually, that's the problem. It's too late when you find out what it is that you're really facing. That had to be very fearful for people, you know. Like if you were going on a trip to grandmother's house, be careful what you meet along the way. It may not be what it really appears to be, you know?
That's right. That's right. Well, when I was doing my research on these things, and speaking of the big bad wolf, there are some jinn that look a lot like what we would consider to be Dogman and werewolves. So, and there's even paintings of these things. Let's see if I have one here to show. There are depictions of Jinn being what look like dogmen and werewolves out there. And there's a certain type of Jinn. It's called the sheik, I think is how you pronounce that. And it assumes a half human form, half animal, half human. But here's the thing. Here's the kicker. It said longitudinally. I can't pronounce that. Longitudinally. Gosh. Spit it out.
Yes, close. You got it. It's close.
It's like, so split in half. So it'd be like half, like it'd be this way, right? Like half the face is like a dog and half is a human. I mean, that's weird.
Half human.
Okay.
Well, that's the thing about the folklore, like in the Irish folklore and all that. You have that human animal hybrid thing going on here. You know, and I was reading something the other night. I was deep into research on this about the Nephilim, and we'll have to do a show on that one day, definitely. The Nephilim, supposedly the fallen angels that came down and bred with human women, okay? They also supposedly not only bred with human women, but bred with animals. And supposedly that's where you get your cryptids from.
Whoa.
Think about it. That's interesting. That's interesting. So you're talking about human hybrid, and between that's another thing about really destroying or disrupting nature. You're going against the laws of nature, and when you do that, nothing ever good comes out of it.
Well, I wouldn't be the cryptid huntress if there weren't any cryptids out there, though. So it's fun. It's fun for me, of course, because I love cryptids. But we wonder, you know, I get asked all the time, where are they from? Like, where are Sasquatch from? Are they original to this planet? Are they some kind of extraterrestrial? Do they come from inner Earth? Like, what are these things? And I don't know all the answers. I don't know any of the answers, actually. So
that's one thing that's always piqued my interest. Okay, I call it things of unknown origin. I want to know what the origin is. I'd like to know where they really started from, where they coming from, how they get here. To me, that's the fascinating part of it too. But that's the thing about the Jinn. Supposedly, the Jinn were created by the Creator. Like I said, they were like a class lower than the angels. That's why they're subject to Allah in that respect in the Islam religion, which talks about them a lot and warns people about them. But you're usually okay with them as long as you're a believer. But if you don't believe, then you may have a bad problem. You usually attract the bad Jinn in that respect. But now the ghouls, to me, are a fascinating part of the Jinn. Like you said, you know, they can shapeshift and entice people and do stuff. But they also are supposedly directly connected to Lilith. Remember her?
Yes.
Lilith? Yeah, they're supposed to be the children of Lilith in that respect. She is the mother of demons. And we're talking about the ghouls now. In that respect, she is their mother. And she is often described, mentioned in the Bible too, by the way, as a screech owl. And the owl is known to inhabit desolate desert places and stuff like that. So you've got a lot of folklore tie-in with this stuff that is fascinating.
Wow, that is fascinating. Wow. Okay, well, I found another type of Jinn that I found really interesting too, called the Delhab or the Delham. And it's a mount. It takes the form of a man mounted on an ostrich. This is like because they have aquatic Jinn too, apparently. Dennis, I didn't know you could. I want to say it sound like a mermaid kind of, but it devours the flesh of shipwrecked men and sailors out at sea. Okay, so there's sea Jinn as well as land Jinn, apparently.
Oh yeah. And you know, there's the other one that actually possesses people like a demon. You know, demonic possession. The Jinn can take over a body in that respect too. That's fascinating too. You've got a lot of different Jinn that you're dealing with here. There's not just one category on them. And as I mentioned earlier when we were talking, it's kind of bled over into our into our modern day things, like with Ra's al Ghul, which is the premier uh, villain of Batman. Ra's al Ghul, that name actually means chief demon, chief head of the demons. Ra's al Ghul actually comes from the Middle East. If you're familiar with Batman, he is one of the worst villains that Batman has ever run into. So I think that was a perfect title for him, definitely.
Oh my gosh, there's a lot of Marvel characters and comic book characters and superheroes that are based off of these demonic, historically demonic figures and things that people have feared that's been passed down in oral tradition and history and literature and stuff. And so I tell you, Venom comes to mind when I was thinking about the Djinn. Venom, I know he kind of is almost like a black goo that takes over, but to me, I thought of Venom for some reason because it kind of takes over the body of the man that it's possessing and, you know, just takes over his body. It's like a soul snatcher, basically.
It is a form of possession. Yeah, definitely. And you speaking of the Marvel characters, DC Comics and all them, you've got Doctor Strange, you've got John Constantine, you've got a lot of guys that are what you would basically call shaman. Really, that's what they are in that respect. They're the heroes of some of them. They're not the villains, but you do have villains that way too. So all of this has bled over into modern day times. But this all has a basis in folklore, without a doubt.
It does. Donna has a good question, Dennis. So if a person goes to sleep with their mouth open, can a Djinn take over their body?
Either that or you can end up with flies in your mouth. One or the other. But definitely you wouldn't want to do that, I would think. And especially in some parts of the world, it would not be a good idea. And by the way, the flies are considered a smaller, lesser form of demons, and jinn too, by the way, because in the Middle East you have a bad problem with flies, biting flies. They get on camels and people and everything else, and you have some bad things over there. I know we've had a lot of our soldiers talk about the camel spiders. They're huge, big spiders that get in their tents and all that. So you've got all this stuff to contend with when you go over there. I had an uncle who was stationed over there many years ago and almost lost his life. You've got some bad things to contend with on a tour over there. And then on top of that, you've got the Djinn.
You do. Speaking of flies are associated with the demonic. And I have a quick story I can tell. When I lived in a super haunted house in downtown Atlanta many years ago, okay, I came home at night. It was back when I was wild and free, okay, and I was out late with some of my friends, and it was in the kind of like the bar district of downtown, right off Ponce de Leon Avenue. And so I came home and I was having some very, very intense paranormal activity happening in that apartment. It was built in an old home, and I lived in a basement apartment of this house. And everything from shadow figures and black balls, like a mass of black, like a black cloud, basically, flew out of my bedroom one day, and it shoved me down into it literally pushed my body down into my cabinets where I was getting some cat food. Okay. And it flew past me into a closet in my living room. Lots of odd stuff happened. Okay. And I came home on 2 different occasions, and I had at least one friend with me. My friend Whitney usually was with me. But she and I both experienced this. I came home and I heard a buzzing sound as I went to the outside door to my apartment down in that basement. And when they had a window in the door, and there was a long hallway that went down to my apartment door on the inside. And on that hallway, on the ceiling, there was a blanket of flies. The entire roof, the entire ceiling was covered. There was not one inch showing that didn't have flies. They were the black flies too. But you could hear the buzz from outside. And so I opened up the door, and the flies didn't move. They just stayed there in like a blanket. That's the only way I can describe it. And she and I just kind of ducked down, and we took off running to my apartment. went inside, and we could hear the buzzing from inside the apartment. But we were kind of scared. We just stayed in there all night. We couldn't really do anything about it, really. I didn't know what to do. So I left it, and the next morning they were gone. All of them were gone. There were a couple of dead flies on the floor, but they were gone. So I think that was some kind of demonic.
It is definitely. That is a demonic sign. Definitely, Jessica. I've had that happen a lot of times. And I warn a lot of investigators. I don't care if it's your cryptid investigating or spiritual, whatever the investigation is. Whatever you're dealing with, anything above the normal, the paranormal, the supernatural. Protect yourself going in and coming out of these situations, okay? Because you can get attachments. These things will follow you back and do this kind of stuff to you. You were very lucky that it went away, or that you did what was appropriate to get rid of it, or the mindset that you had, whatever the situation. You were lucky. I've had many cases with investigators come to me with this problem. And you need to protect yourself in and out of the situation spiritually. You got to put that protection on yourself. Or you'll be sorry if you don't, if you're not careful.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That was a scary time in my life with all of the paranormal stuff that was going on. I mean, I even watched an object levitate right in front of my face, like right in front of me. I had a glass vase that was on my bedside table levitate, and I watched it kind of move off of the table and then just sit straight, and it set in the air. And then when I screamed, it fell on the ground and it didn't break. On a hardwood floor.
It was trying to freak you out too. These things, they work on you psychologically too. I said they can attack you physically, mentally, emotionally, and they can do that spiritually as well. But they're just trying to freak you out a lot of times to create that negativity. And luckily you didn't fall for that. But they want to create that negativity, get you scared, get you worried, to feed off of that. And the Jinn are no different in that respect. The Jinn look for that emotional output, and that's why in the Middle East, they don't like to talk that much about the Jinn. Sort of like we talk, the Native Americans are with the Skinwalker, or like demonologists, we don't like to talk about the names of demons. You don't want to get the unwanted attention of these things, like what happened with you. You don't want to get that attention.
That's right. I was a lighthouse over there for that. It was just odd. I've never had that problem since, and I hope to never have that ever again. But it was actually kind of cool that I got to experience that, because I saw how scary it can be. So I can talk about it today. That's also the apartment where I had the black-eyed person show up at my door one night. And his eyes were completely black. Completely. There were no whites in his eyes at all. And so so I did not open the door. Yeah, we didn't open the door. And that's it's similar to some of these stories that I've heard of some of our US soldiers over in the Middle East, when they go over there and have a lot of paranormal activity that goes on over there. And and some of it could be Jinn related. And then some of it's just paranormal, because there's a whole lot of, in a war zone, there's a lot of death and destruction.
Well, that's an interesting aspect, Jessica. When you're in a war zone, you've got a lot of trauma going on. You've got death and suffering. You've got that not just in the Middle East, you've got it in Asia too, big time. You've got a lot of this trauma that's been there. You've got old battlefields. You've got people who are directly, just like the people in the Middle East and in Asia, are directly connected to their ancestors in many aspects. They're very conscious of the invisible spiritual world around them. And I think that opens doorways too,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we talk about the battlefields here in the South, Kennesaw battlefield, Pickett's Mill, Chickamauga, where the Civil War was fought. And there are areas of super high strangeness with a lot of cryptid reports, a lot of cryptid sightings, a lot of ghosts. I've even heard phantom cannons going off out there before, personally, where the ground shook and everything. So a lot of things manifesting in war zones and places where blood was shed.
Oh yeah, Yeah, definitely. And that is, I like that comment there. Just listening to shows enough to get yourself an attachment. It depends. It depends a lot on your mindset. You can. Here's the way I've only myself personally taken it over the years. Okay, I've had a lot of people ask me, "You studied all this about the occult and all these things. Were you ever tempted to try it out? Were you ever tempted to mess with some of that stuff?" I said, no, not really. I take it from a scholarly point of view. I've detached myself from that emotionally, you might say, in that respect. That's a good mindset to have when dealing with these subjects. You can become obsessed, though. I've had a lot of people come to me and say, "Oh, tell me about demons, demons, demons. I want to know all about demons." They're obsessed with that, and I tell them, "Don't do that. That is not a good mindset. You need to take it from a scholarly, detached point of view on these things, because these things can attach to you emotionally, and if you're obsessed and emotionally invested in it too much, they pay attention to that, and you don't want to go that
Mhm.
route."
That's right. Wink at Me has an interesting comment too. Some of these soldiers brought Jinn back with them. They can attach to you.
Mm. Oh
Okay.
yeah, oh yeah. That's
That's
attachments,
creepy.
definitely. Yeah, so the old monkey on your back kind of a thing. You end up with an attachment you don't want. It depends too a lot. And I'm gonna say this: if they get involved with some of the wrong people over there, like maybe some of the women or some of the men, whichever the case may be, if they get involved with some of the wrong people, those people may have attachments, and that attachment can attach to you. So you have to be very careful who you're dealing with. Yeah,
Tell me about it.
like I say, there's usually a reason for an attachment. Just like you had happen because you went to that certain area. You can't just be walking down the street and bam, you get some kind of attachment. You got to usually be in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's what happens.
That's
And
right.
I think that has happened with a lot of our soldiers who have come back from areas like that. Definitely.
Hmm. Yeah, in my case, that house was haunted, and it had to do with an attachment at that home, I do believe. Um, Now, Paul, thank you for your service, and I want to thank all the men and women in the chat and watching who have served our country and have done tours overseas, and even just served here at home. Okay, but he says that he lived in the Philippines for 1 year, Korea 6 years, and Guam for 3 years. Saw ghosts in all three places.
Mm,
Wow.
I don't
I
doubt
didn't
it.
hear
I
that.
don't doubt it. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that
Like
a
I
lot.
said, that area over there, especially the eastern and Asian part, they're very, very spiritually conscious of the things around them, and I think this gives power to these things. It gives more power to them. So definitely, you're going in a hot area, without a doubt, in a place like that. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. Well, I know you had mentioned that you had a story about the cave systems and the
Hmm.
Jinn being over there, and I guess it was the Middle East, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
maybe we can get to these stories before we end the show today, and I'll mention some of the stories from some of the soldiers that I had encountered.
Well, there is one account of a military detachment, a U.S. military detachment that was sent into a cave. Now, the reason they were going into this cave system, they were looking for terrorists. I think this was in Iraq, if I'm not mistaken. And they were going into these cave systems looking for terrorists. I don't think they found any terrorists, but they said while they were there, they were attacked in this cave system by, well, they could only describe as shadow like beings. They say that these things actually physically assaulted them while in this cave system, and it also they had night vision goggles. And they said that you could see these things. I think you did a show on that too, very similar to that about the goggles. But these night vision goggles, they could see these things, and then they could take the goggles down. They couldn't see them. They could see these shadow figures, but they were actually physically attacked, and they were also uh, mentally attacked. In other words, they said it fogged our brains up so bad we were walking in the walls inside this cave. Said we the finally the sergeant had to get us out. He said We pulled us out because there weren't any terrorists there. There was something bad. He said, as he said in his own words, there was some bad juju in that cave, definitely. And said when we got out that some of this stuff even followed them back to the base. Things still happened. Things went on. It was almost as if the spiritual attack did not end with them leaving the cave system. But finally, he said after a few days, it all went away. But said it was one of the most freakiest things they'd ever run into. But they all experienced it, not just a couple of them, two or three of them, but they all experienced this spiritual attack in the cave. And he said that he had mentioned that to one of the guys that was a native over there, and he said, "Oh, that was the Jinn. The Jinn were protecting that cave, and you were in their cave, and they didn't want you there."
Ooh. Oh my gosh, I can see that. There's also stories of the giants being in the caves over there in Afghanistan with the giant of
Mhm.
Kandahar. So there's all sorts
Yeah.
of strange things lurking around in those caves over
Oh,
there.
definitely.
Wow.
And
I wonder.
that's an interesting thing, Jessica, about the caves. Whenever you go underground, I've been in some caves. It's a freaky place to go. Okay, it's not one of my favorite places to be, but when you go there, you're in another completely different world. And if I were going to be some kind of subspecies and I wanted to get away from mankind, that's the place I would go. That's where I would live, and I would inhabit that place. That would be the perfect hiding place. And whenever you enter their territory, just like you enter the territory of a mountain lion. If you're out in the woods in a mountain lion's territory, it begins to stalk you, whether you know it or not. And eventually, at the end, when you get you close enough, you will find out they're stalking you. But that's the way it goes with the Jinn and these other things, and the giants too, supposedly in these caves. When you go into their territory, you're asking for trouble.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Now, a lot of the stories that I've come across with soldiers that are in the middle, mostly the Middle East, who have encountered paranormal activity. A lot of times, it has to do with what we would consider to be either a ghoul or a ghost of some sort, or just something that was
Mhm,
kind of phantom, something they couldn't see, but was
mhm,
messing with them. And but there was also an interesting note because on a lot of the stories that I was looking into, they said that these places where they had the most activity were used as what they consider to be death camps, where people, where bombings had taken place, where bodies had been piled up and things like that. And it was just like we had mentioned with the almost like the battlegrounds and stuff, and like where the Civil War places,
mhm.
the battlefields were here in the South that I've been to that are haunted. Um, kind of like that.
Well, that happens, Jessica. Very well known fact that demons, jinn, whatever name you want to give them, these evil spirits, they tend to gravitate towards places of trauma, intense mental pain, physical pain, and anguish. I worked at a hospital for 30 years, and that was one of the most haunted places I've ever been in. I had some very interesting haunted experiences there. Those are places of trauma, and you can always look for that to happen there. That's where spiritual entities are drawn to it like a magnet.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now, even in the barracks where these guys are sleeping, the ladies and gentlemen, guys and gals, are sleeping, they often would wake up to have shadow figures sitting in their room, staring at them. Uh, Solid black figures. Okay, now I've actually encountered this before. Okay, I've seen them. I
Yeah.
actually had a solid black mass that floated through my apartment one day, and
Mhm,
actually touched my body, like touched me and pushed me
mhm,
down. But they describe that, and also of seeing people. Okay, it's
mhm,
almost like that uncanny valley. It's like people, but they're not human, or they don't have a soul to them, or something. And they
mhm.
they look human, but they're not quite human. And so I'm assuming that
Right.
could be like what a Jinn is.
I call those kind of entities lost souls. Actually, they look human, but they're really not. They have that facade, but that's it. If you look in their eyes, there's nothing there. They have no feeling about them of being actual human. When you actually deal with human beings, you get a feeling from it. Some people are more sensitive than others to it. You get a feeling off of them. But when you run into these kind of energies, it's just dead. There's nothing there, And also, these things seem to feed off of your energy. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
they're drawing off of you. You feel that too. When you do, you're not dealing with something that's human, really.
Oh, yeah. Humans are like batteries. Okay, and the higher vibe you have, the higher vibrational frequency, more things are going to be attracted to you. And I think that's why a lot of times some people have more paranormal activity that happens around them because they are like a beacon of light. And
Oh yeah.
and the things out there, whatever they are
And it
gonna.
can work the other way too, Jessica. If you're walking around depressed, you're living a bad lifestyle, you're really negative, 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 you're going to attract negative even more than you normally would. That's just a spiritual law, principle of the universe. I've seen that happen many times, and that's why I tell a lot of people when they have these attacks and stuff, try to get in a positive frame of mind. Try to get that inner light going. Try to get that up, that good feeling up, because that's what combats this darkness. You know. And I think a lot of our military personnel have found that out. They found that out the hard way, unfortunately, especially being in the very anxious, very nervous, and very negative situations that they get into over there. That's another factor that they've got to worry about is the spiritual side of it.
Oh yeah. Now Scott, you kind of answered Scott's question. He said, "How do you leave the bad energy at the hospital or wherever you pick it up at?" Because he believes his wife brings it home with her.
But
Wow.
that's another thing, very much like I said about the investigation. She needs to, before going to work every morning. Here's my advice to her. I would say a little prayer of protection, going to work and coming home. Said I want to leave all this bad stuff behind me. I want to push it away. Tell it to leave me alone. Be aware of that. And do that. That will go a long ways to help you day after day. Keep this stuff from following you home and affecting you. And I've been, being in law enforcement, I understand this very much, that you deal with a lot of negativity all day long. And you've got to kind of take that off at the end of the day like a jacket, and put it down. Because if you don't, it will begin to affect you in many different ways, not just spiritually, but in physically, mentally, emotionally. It will begin to take a toll on you. And you've got to say, like I said about the thing earlier, about that scholarly point of view, you've got to detach yourself emotionally. Don't become emotionally invested in it too much, because these things, that gets their attention. And they say, hey, we've got a handle here. We can grab a hold of here. So you don't want to give them that handle. Definitely.
That's right. And Dennis, you mentioned in the beginning of the show today that a lot of people overseas in the Middle East, they wear their amulets on their necklace. So like a pendant or something of protection, a protection amulet, a protection stone, something to protect you in the physical like that would be a good thing to use as well.
Oh yeah, well, that's like I said about the Jinn. If they wear that amulet with a God name of God on it, that's supposed to protect you from the bad guys. In that respect, that's a sign of faith on their part.
Mhm.
Religious faith. I think creates a positive attitude in you, and it makes, like I said earlier, it gives that bumper around you. That's like in Italy. I know there's a big thing about the evil eye in Italy. And you've got this thing that was always a thing to kind of keep the evil eye away from you. And they actually sell amulets that look like a hand that does this to ward off the evil eye. Um, so you have this in different parts of the world, but I think it helps to create a positive attitude in your mind. I say it gives you a kind of hook to hang it on, kind of thing.
It does. That's my motto. High vibe tribe, babe. High vibe tribe.
Hmm.
Y'all get on the high vibe tribe and keep all the Jinn away from you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so a lot of the stories that I was reading, and when I was looking into some of these paranormal events that happened to some of the military overseas, it had to deal with like rocks being thrown at the soldiers and things happening. It almost sounded like what the Bigfoots do to us out in the field.
Yeah.
Trickster spirits, kind of things being thrown at them. Women yelling. They were always hearing a lot of screams and yells, kind of like what we hear in the woods when we're doing our Bigfooting as well. But then every account, the soldiers put their night vision goggles on and they looked and there was nothing there. There was nothing there. So I found that was really interesting. And you mentioned the dicyanin dye goggles. You're talking about the dicyanin dye goggles. Now I did do a hey Mike. I did a show on the dicyanin dye goggles. My goodness, Dennis, that thing has gotten more views than any show on my entire channel. Okay. It was super. I don't know if it was clickbait or if people are just really interested in dicyanin dye goggles, because that is those goggles from Vietnam that you had mentioned, where the soldiers were putting those on and they could see into another dimension. Okay. And so I guess that was probably a good thing that they did not have dicyanin dye goggles there in the middle.
Along those same lines, Jessica, there's always been a contention in folklore and stuff that certain crystals can help you see these dimensions. Take, for instance, the witch stone that has a natural hole in it. Supposedly, if you look through it at certain times, you can see other dimensions as well. A lot of these things supposedly are able to pierce that, what I call that magical dimension that's around us. In other words, that spiritual aspect of things. To me, that is very interesting. I've experimented with crystals in that respect. And seen some freaky stuff, and you hear about scrying and mirrors and all that. These are just reflections of things that may be around us that we can't see with the human eye. The human eye takes in very little stuff. I mean, there's so much of the spectrum that we cannot see. So I would say if something aids you and helps you see better, it is a definite plus in my book.
Oh yeah, as long as your mind's right. You got to have your mind right. People aren't prepared to see into other dimensions. I don't think some people aren't, but it's got to just add another layer of just being terrified too when you're. And I'm not saying soldiers are always terrified, but I mean, if I was in a wartime type of a situation, it would be scary. It really would be.
Oh yeah. It would have to be.
Want to see her
definitely, and just like you said about the rock throwing, that's the perfect way to get somebody's attention. I've had Bigfoot throw rocks at me. That gets your attention right off the bat real quick. And these things sometimes want your attention, okay? Because there again, they can get your interest going. They get you fearful a little bit, or whatever the situation is. And that's why they do these things. It's theatrics, just to get you in that position they want you in. Don't fall for the trick. Don't buy the lie. Don't let them fool you, okay? Because sometimes that's what they're up to. They want to rattle you, definitely. Don't let them jerk your chain.
Well, going back to the Jinn and they can make you have hallucinations and put thoughts into your head. From what I understand, I think you mentioned that. And some of the soldiers that were having accounts of paranormal stuff happening, they were having hallucinations that were associated with some of these forms and figures that were coming like people, but they would disappear right before their eyes. And when they would encounter some of these figures, people who they thought were actual humans, but would disappear before their eyes, they would start smelling smells like baked bread. And having thoughts of being back home and being in some kind of comfortable, almost like lulling them to sleep, kind of calming their nerves, and then having them follow what they thought were humans into the desert, into the dark. Kind of being
like I said, about what happened in that cave, Jessica. They began to attack them mentally. Okay, these things can take these images, and I've had this happen to me. Okay, they can take images from your subconscious and use them against you. They can make you see things that aren't there. They can make you experience things that aren't real. They can twist and bend your reality, and that's what's so freaky, worrisome about this stuff. Okay, you don't know what you're dealing with. You got to be very, very careful, because what you're looking at may not be real, or is it?
Yeah,
you never know.
I know, and it's getting harder to tell what's real and what's not these days, and so many different, layers. Seriously, with like the
Uh,
AI, we got spirits, we got aliens coming out of portals in the mall. I mean,
uh,
what is going on?
you
What's
got
going
some
on,
freaky
Dennis?
stuff. Yeah. What's
You
real?
do.
What's real? And I said this not long ago, Jessica. I think there are certain forces in this world that want to twist our reality
Yeah.
and get us off guard so that we're walking in muddy water. You know, when you were a kid and you walked out in the lake, you couldn't see where you put your feet. The water would be so muddy, you didn't know where you were going. That's the way they want us, okay? They want to keep us confounded and confused because then we're what? Off guard. We're not on our guard, we're
Mhm.
off guard. And so I think that's why they want to mess with our reality a lot. They want to keep us guessing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm still guessing. I'm confused. I'm more confused than I've ever been, but I'm in it to win it. We're gonna look into this stuff no matter what, and in some wild, crazy way, a lot of this stuff is connected, in some way, and I thought it was important that, we're in such wild times right now, and it seems as though we may be in a wartime situation right now, with the sending soldiers to the Middle East right now. When in my opinion, they need to be here. But um, you know, but there's going to be soldiers that encounter things like that over there, and so I think it's
That,
kind of cool to put this out there.
that's
With
bad to think about too, Jessica. You not only got to worry about your physical safety, you got to worry about your spiritual safety as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Your spiritual safety, your
You
energetic
don't get
safety.
by the way, you don't get a Purple Heart for that.
Yeah.
Definitely, for only the physical things. And that's the bad thing about it. We don't, our soldiers are put in harm's way, definitely. And it's a wonderful thing that they sacrifice to do that for us, for our freedoms and everything, without a doubt. My hat's always tipped off to them. I come from a long line of veterans. But let me say this, it's bad enough when you got to worry about the physical and the psychological parts of it, but also the spiritual thing is going on too. You better watch out for that too, because it's just as virulent and just as dangerous if not handled correctly. That
Um,
I think some of them they actually need some type of spiritual counseling when they come back from over there.
oh yeah. Absolutely. That's a great idea, actually. I think that, a lot of people, I know myself, I've been tapping into my spirituality and spiritual side. And of course, I'm over here doing my remote viewing stuff. And,
Yeah.
that's, let's just say, like, remote viewing has been part of a military program. And it has a huge spiritual side, a huge spiritual aspect. And it's all about protecting your
Yeah.
energetic field and things like that. So
Yeah. The
it is part of the
spiritual
military.
welfare. Your
Yeah.
spiritual welfare is a definite thing going on there. Here's one more thing I'll tell you right quick. It's very interesting. I always study about how to get rid of these things. You know, how do you kill the Jinn? You can kill the Jinn,
Wow.
actually. And the only way you can kill the Jinn is you have to kill them in their physical form. If they're like a snake or a donkey or a person or whatever, if you kill them in their physical form, they will die. And
Wow.
that's it. Yeah, that's the way you get rid of the Jinn.
Wow. That's really good to
Uh-huh.
know. That's great to know.
Uh-huh.
Hey, so there's a way to get rid of them if you have to. Just
Uh-huh.
wait till they
Yeah.
turn into a human,
Yep.
or a dog, or an ass.
Yeah,
Feel
whatever the case may be.
free to ask.
Because we
Right.
have a lot of those in Washington, but I won't get into that. But anyway, uh,
Right.
uh, if
Yeah.
you can take care of them that way, or you can wear the amulet with God's name on it. That will keep them off your back too. But
Uh,
there are always ways to deal supposedly with these things for your own safety. But like we said earlier, the main thing I think is your outlook on it, and putting that spiritual bumper around you. That would be the way to go, definitely.
yes. We have a question, Dennis. Do jinns grant wishes? That's from King Hueco Mundo. Do they grant
Now rub
wishes?
that lamp.
Yeah.
Uh, But you know, supposedly in folklore with the Jinn, that they can actually, if you're on their good side, like I said earlier, if you're in good with the Jinn, they will help you and do things for you. I don't know if there's a certain number of wishes you get off of that or what, but if you're on the bad side now, you might not get your wishes fulfilled. But usually, if you're in good with them, and that actual story of Aladdin and Aladdin's lamp and all that is based deep in the folklore of Arabia. And the genie was actually a guardian over a great treasure. If you go back and read about it, he was a guardian over a great treasure. But once he became your servant, and you know you could have a jinn serve you, sort of like these guys that call up supposed demons and get them to work for them. You could have this servant. He was supposed to grant your wishes, whatever they may be.
Wow. Okay, we have another question from David. In the physical, do they die in the physical form only, and or die in the spiritual form as well?
Well, when you kill them in the physical form, that's the end of them. They're supposed to be.
Okay.
That's it. Then they exist no more. But they have to. It has to be in their physical form. You can't kill a spirit.
Wow. Okay, this is an interesting statement too from King Weko Mundo. Many magicians have had help from jinns. I've read stories of people in Saudi Arabia capturing them, but they all died young. Ooh, interesting.
They're basically like, you know, the familiar spirits you hear about with witchcraft and dark occultic properties. When you go in league with these forces, it never comes out good in the end. They've got the advantage over you. You're always at a disadvantage, whether you believe it or not. That's the way that I should work. Now, I always say we have a term in the South. You get the short end of the stick in this deal, okay? And that's the way they work, okay? That's just the way it's going to work. And it's sort of like the leprechauns. You know, you always thought you got your hand on that pot of gold, but you never did because that's just the way they work. They would fool you every time or trick you into losing it. That's just the way. And the Jinn are no different in that respect.
Oh yeah, you got to be quicker than that. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's get that gold. You're always chasing it, but you never get it. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, I have an interesting story. My friend Brian Singh, he's been on the show before. He met David Copperfield in person
Mm-hmm.
when he was younger, and he I believe I can't remember the whole story, but it was something. It felt like there was some kind of black magic or something going on that he was almost like he was possessed. Okay, when he met, like his eyes.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
when you deal with those kind of subjects, and I've been accustomed to that myself, you're tempted to mess around with it. Okay, even if you're an illusionist or a magician and not a real magician, you are, I think, tempted to mess around with stuff like that because you're dealing with a subject that, you know, it's like the dark side in Star Wars. There's a temptation to it. There's a draw there, whether you want it or not. And you have to be very careful if you fall into the temptation of that. It can wrap those dark chains of darkness around you, and you're lost. You're lost forever to the dark side. You have to be very careful when you play around with the dark side because it can play around with you.
I know, right? Well, David Copperfield puts on a cool show, though. Okay.
Oh yeah,
It's terrible.
he's very good.
He is.
He's
He is.
very good with it.
No, thank you so much for that super sticker. That means the world to me. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, that's interesting. David Blaine. Okay, we're talking about magicians here, and Nunya Biz. I like that name. Nunya Biz says David Blaine is involved in a Faustian bargain. Yeah, that's where it's like a deal with the devil, right?
Yeah, well, they supposedly sort of like the magician, the musician at the crossroads. Magicians, a lot of times, there's been a lot of stories, even Houdini supposedly, we made pacts with the devil to learn tricks and to learn certain illusions they could perform and all that. But you have that kind of a legend in a lot of professions, like musicians.
Wow. Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe there's some jinns inhabiting the bodies of the famous pop performers that we watch today, the ones that perform at the Super Bowl. Who knows? Who knows?
Oh, yeah.
Man, this has been a fantastic discussion today, Dennis. Thank you so much for being here. Oh my gosh.
Oh, it was a
Do
pleasure.
you have any final thoughts on the Jinn today before we go?
Well, I think the Jinn are a very interesting subject for anyone to, but don't look too deep into them. You don't want to mess with them. And like I said, they're tricky. They're very tricky, and they're very ambiguous. They can treat you any way they want to. So if you ever run into the Jinn, get help. Get help. Okay, don't try to face them alone, but be very careful because the number one thing they work on is the mind. That's the thing that they go after. Like all of these so-called evil spirits, that's one area they can get you in, and you have to be very careful when dealing with these forces, without a doubt.
Oh, yeah. Can be very dangerous for sure. And Dennis, where can people find you? Tell the audience about your YouTube channel.
Okay, well, you can reach me anytime at denniswcarroll.com. That's my website. And also tonight I'll be doing a show on Hunting the Shadows at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. Look for that's my YouTube channel name, by the way, Hunting the Shadows YouTube channel. That'll be 9 o'clock. We're going to be doing ghost animals tonight, so it's going to be very interesting. And I also have another show I do on Friday nights at 8 o'clock p.m., which is called Paranormal Point of View. And I'm going to be talking about this Friday about when the paranormal strikes back. So that's going to be an interesting show.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait. I love your shows, Dennis.
Well,
It's always interesting. I always learn something. And I hope the audience learned something today because I know I did. So thank you so much again for being here today, Dennis. And
always a pleasure.
Absolutely. I look forward to doing more shows with you because we always have a really good time. Even when we're talking about all this dark stuff, we still make it fun somehow. Right.
There you go. Great minds think alike.
Yes, absolutely.
There you go.
Totally. And I want to thank everybody in the audience for being here today. You guys rock. No, thank you for that super sticker. And I also want to say another happy birthday to Gus. He's one of my moderators. He's a doggy dog. Okay, that's the girl in her gong, Maureen. Give Gus a hug for me today. That's his birthday. And so you guys come see me tomorrow night. We'll be back here at 8 o'clock p.m. with a remote viewing show. I'm not exactly sure which target we're going to be discussing tomorrow night, but I will figure that out before the show tomorrow. So you guys, thanks again for being here. I will see you tomorrow night, and then come see me again this weekend at Spaced Out Radio for another amazing show there. Dennis, have a great day. We'll see you tonight over on Hunting the Shadows. All right. Y'all have a great day. Okay. Bye, y'all.